All right, good morning. It is Monday, the 29th. Let's get started with the pre-market routine. As we start off, like looking at yields, we see a little bit of consolidation after a nice down move. Really helped us in that TLT trade, kicking that off. We're looking for continuation there for TLT over 87 as we move down, kind of what's been moving the market. We see the small caps really breaking out of this, longer term like cup and handle, and accelerating upward. We see growth really lagging, driven by the Mag 7, full breakdown structure there. So we'll see what comes. A lot of headwinds with, CapEx spending and things like that. We see momentum still driving up. Again, can the small caps and the momentum continue, you know, in hopes of lower rates and things that will fuel that and money moving from the growth sector over to small caps and some of the value names too that we saw. As we dig into the SPY, I mean, we need confirmation of a bigger breakout, right? As these things need to reclaim and hold some of these key moving averages, the 5D SMA, the 80 MA, the 21 moving average. We haven't really seen a firm confirmation there. We've kind of been looking at the RSP and equal weight for more of the clues of what's moving since we know this drawdown has been largely from the Mag 7 being so sluggish as they were in their sell pattern, just kind of pulling the market in a little bit and uh, diverting money elsewhere. So we're going to open here. Let me see where the spies are right now, 737, 30-ish. So yeah, we're going to open right in the gap here. It'll be another gap up tester. Do they sell down and break the 8 day again, or do we accelerate upward? Um, I am in the camp that I think we do accelerate upward and start reclaiming some of these averages, and hopefully make our way towards new highs into the new quarter. So new flows will actively be working. They did a lot of their rotations and shifts this past week. The prior Thursday is when they were due to make that rotation and kind of offload what they need to and start placing money, which you saw morning buying and then could not sustain. To me, that is placement of, actual share funds and things like that. We look at the put call ratios every day. And these were really pointing out that they weren't really heavily loading into the call print, right? So loading shares can make their moves there. And then as they get, a foundation of what they want to move, then they can, actually make those moves accelerate by triggering calls, which they know everyone is monitoring and piggybacks off those trades. So here's the RSP. Again, the equal weight's kind of been in a steady uptrend. Sorry I didn't do more of a zoom out for you guys there. Now, is this showing maybe some selling pressure? It could be. Its failures to make new highs would be looking for, a 213 close for a confident, rally higher. Dropping down to the mags. Again, classic sell formation here. It accelerated through there under 64. And now you're getting some, relief reversals here, but can it hold the 6250 or higher? This morning looks like it's trying to get some bids. We'll see who the active movers are there, obviously in the live trading room. Bitcoin, kind of the same story here. Can't really get a footing yet. And I would want to see some of these moving averages reclaim. We used to use the 64,000 level. That broke, couldn't hold. So it's a no touch from there. If we reclaim 62, okay, we'll start thinking about it. And do we get that pressure to 64, 68, 74 and start an explosive move upward? But we'll let the tape tell us that story. I do think this area needs a catalyst to drive that higher. We look into oil, with U.S. tensions with Iran. Steady downtrend ever since this couldn't hold 143 as the team was using. We got some sympathy rallies here, and then people made a lot of money just shorting the crap out of this downward. Under all the moving averages, if you were to flip this chart upside down, you would say this is a very bullish momentum, and people were treating it the same. And then if you don't like to short things, well, what's going to go up from this? Obviously, jets and airlines and the travel sector really loved that move, and they caught a lot of those the tailwinds from that. So we saw names like Airbnb breaking out. You saw Sherwin-Williams turning around on, hopefully lower rates, higher housing turnover with existing home sales doing well, and they were really hindered by that increased oil pricing that kind of hurt them. So that was the big turnaround catalyst. You have names like Home Depot improving strongly off the rebound. Again, what we want to see in this peak season, what we were planning for in, the playbook was that we were going to see this housing turnaround, some rate cuts with the TLT going up, and helping out the consumer who is struggling, right? And then again, like with where those funds are going, we saw some of these smaller sectors that are really tough in other environments, especially when the Mag 7s are moving. It is impossible to get biotechs and genome plays really accelerating and getting the funding that they would need since, they're operating on such high debt. You get this influx of cash and things suddenly change, right? We saw this strong breakout and it held and retested on the weekly and continuation upward for ARCG, which we're kind of using as our benchmark for that sector. But we saw other, healthcare and insurance names all pressuring higher as well. So a couple winners within this group, if you peel back the layers on the names driving that, you got like Twist, Beam, TXG, CRISPR, TEM. Those are some of Kathy's core holdings in that ETF. Going down to semiconductors. All right, we see the small reversal on the weekly. I don't think it screams bearish for the demand that these, names have seen just across the board. On the daily, yeah, we did have some breakdown. You finally got across of the 80 MA. You're touching the 21 day. They're looking to open almost 10 points higher. So we'll see what they do here. If they're gonna hold that move and go, or if that money is still rotating out of there. Again, earlier we talked about the TLT and the rates, right? Where a lot of these smaller moves fuel larger moves. So a nice inverted head and shoulders here, and looking for the range breakout, similar that we just showed on ARCG. This is kind of what I'm looking for. We've been playing, for months now. I was loading into the August 85s and 86s, so we're well within the money there. May roll some. We sell some calls against there on high pops and collect the premium from there, and that's part of just risk management that we teach within here. So that's been very good. I know a lot of people are dead focused on the SpaceX trades and things like that, but I've seen people kind of get stuck there while this is sluggish and consolidating sideways. Does it break upward? It can. There have been so many other names and sectors moving that it's a little hard for me to pay attention to that and use bandwidth for that when, you know, the long-awaited IGV death of software trade is certainly improving in this tape, right? Where you could not get out of its own way in this sell pattern down, and then they had a strong rally, which was sold off a lot harder than people thought it would. Again, just the nature of this market, nature of the algos, they're going to take things harder and further than they ever have to just really create those head fakes and stop out people for extra liquidity they need. So we'll see if this can, maintain over at least the 5 day. Even if we get some pullback today, which today it looks like it is up nicely, and we're getting some continuation in some of those, strong leaders. So when we talk about software, who are we talking about? The loudest names, which, Jensen's been about, and, ServiceNow, you got APP in that category. You got some of the smaller movers within there that let's see, we had a CRM, which I personally would not really touch. The name has just been horrible for a long time, and they really need to prove themselves. So we'll let the numbers tell that for them. But then you look at like some of the smaller ones like Spotify, who like not super big overhead, but again, they had the run of a lifetime, and now it is consolidating down here. Does it break back over 500 and get some legs, or does it try and move down to the 200 weekly moving average? We'll see what that story has for us. Look at like a Netflix, who's also comparable, which a lot of these are doing the same turnaround. Again, you want to see them really hold this gap and go. Does it need more consolidation versus a straight up V pattern? We'll see. Does the market have enough legs like that? One thing I failed to go over this morning, not related to software, but the Dow. We talked about the equal weight. The Dow has been a steady barometer, of just like what you want to see from all these names and tie yourself to the winners in that group. And they're ever rotating too. So we talked about oil going down and rates kind of helping out this turnaround play that we wanted to see in Home Depot, and we're finally getting it right where you're looking at the smaller patterns, inverse head and shoulders here, leading to larger pattern breakouts that you can trust a little bit more on higher time frames. Sometimes when these patterns are so sharp and explosive, they can blow past where everyone's probably waiting for a right shoulder to form, and that might not happen. This just might keep continuing onward if you get the right catalyst driving it. We talked about Sherwin-Williams. We were on this a lot before. It broke down. We got out of the way, kind of save us some carnage there. But now you get decreasing oil. You're getting better housing turnover. RSI steadily improving as the tape was kind of consolidating. So I'm definitely bullish. This name has a lot of good things to it, with the industrials doing absolutely amazing. You have ISM manufacturing continue to be, leading the tape, and the U.S. going to be a leading exporter. I don't see that story changing at all. So I don't see this as just like a trade. It's like a more of like a macro trend that will continue. We talked about software and housing. Well, FICO is a big part of that. I know a couple people have been in that. We've traded it plenty of times, and now we're seeing if it can actually show us the real strength. Where we're seeing it in the daily, I need to see a little bit more strength on the weekly to truly trust this, because it has been full of head fakes in the past. They have some competition upcoming. We think that competition will be squashed by their pricing, and kind of the labor that it would take to convert over to things like Vantage Score for these bigger banks and clientele that they're still going to trust and use this, especially in maybe a questionable consumer. They want to know what they're getting and not roll the dice on using a new scoring metric. What else did we go over? Metals. Metals have kind of been struggling. The one I really want to keep an eye on here is copper. So I would want to see this turn around and start reclaiming these moving averages. We're a bit extended down here right now. See where we're kind of opening a little flat. But again, does this break out and keep showing a strength in, building and industrials? Um, we'll see what that story has to tell us. So a lot of times they use copper as, a metric of how the macro market's doing and what kind of strength we see in, expansion or contraction. Related to that, we have transports, which we've been bullish on. You got UNP. Like I said, if industrials are improving and we're constantly moving things around, we have government spending on military manufacturing. Well, they got to move that equipment, right? So UNP and CSX are your guys there. CSX, one of your more explosive names. I think there's more room for, upward momentum there. With their double stack initiative they started in Q2. We'll see if that plays out in the earnings call. QQQ, really same story. I mean, we've seen money rotating kind of into that secondary tech. It's been a mixed bag on who's getting the attention in here, but we've seen Mag 7 just really get, we say crushed, but like these names, they're not even down like 30%, but I get it. It's a lot for those mega cap companies, and you're swinging like trillions and trillions of dollars at a time. So I understand the pain there. If we look at some of these like smaller sectors, like we'll look like drones. Once they broke here and like we didn't have overall strength in the indices, it was really hard to stay with those plays, and they're not showing you, the catalyst that you need. They had a fake breakout and took everyone out with it. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to be back, because drones are 100%, you know, going to be a steady part of the future, and I think there's a lot of growth opportunity there. So, I mean, if you're a long-term investor, these are probably levels that you would start looking at to get in some of you know, the leading names there, like ONDS and Unusual Machines. So ONDS with military contracts they keep getting. Can this turn around and reclaim here? I probably wouldn't even touch it until it's breaking 9 and showing me better Momentum towards 14 again for the bigger breakout. I just have no interest as a trader down here. You can look at like UMAC, which we know that Trump is on the board of. And then you look at names like Joby for, more retail application, with their acquisition of Flyblade, are these going to be the Uber helicopters and things like that? So we'll see. I think there's a lot of potential for these companies. If you zoom way out, they're in an uptrend still, right? Regardless of how high up they went and how low they are, when you zoom out, you are still in an uptrend. We look at while we're still talking about the transports, we look at Uber. Uber had a strong move here. Again, off the weakened oil. If travel's going to increase, well, if you fly somewhere, guess what? You're Ubering from the airport and getting around that way. And I think that they are still the leader in the industry. They were kind of beaten and battered down. I don't know if it's off robotaxi concerns, Waymo, you name it, but now you get this RSI break on the weekly. You got strong surge RSI on the daily. You got power bars of buying. You got Pelosi buying calls. It certainly helps the tape, right? So a lot of good working in that story. Again, for as bad as people want to say the tape is, it's really not when you get into what is moving the market. So we always say, watch what money is doing, not what people are just saying. There's a lot of noise out there. You need to block it out and just really dig deep and find the bull market within, the consolidation because the money is moving and names are going up and showing their faces. So just stay level headed and it always pays to be a bull, rarely pays to be a bear. And when you're shorting, you better be right, you better be quick, and you better have your size appropriate because you can get ran over really fast. All right, so we got 9:19, 10 minutes to the open. I think that's it for the recap right now. Again, I'll be back on the mic around like 10:30, and then we're on later in the room around 3:45 for the recap. Within the trading room, we're trading all day, so that's just constant action. You guys are just seeing a bit of a recap, of everything that we go over right now, as we're getting our way, we're getting our footing in the room and where we want to be and, entering, welcoming new members in. Everyone who's in the room contributes solid data points that we use, and that's what it's used for. I'm not here to say that you guys are going to get rich quick. No, absolutely not. Don't even join if that's what you think is going to happen. This is about setting your risk tolerance, knowing what's going on in the macro markets, using each data point and what people have to offer in different industries that we're not experts in to influence, our trades and our opinions and add them, as incremental data points to our own process. So keep all that in mind and best of luck today, guys. Thank you.